Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is for you guys. So we're going to go through the Dutch, the various colonies, the Dutch, the Spanish, and the French, and where they colonized for the Americas. We're going to talk a little bit about Spain and Portugal. We'll touch a little bit on the British, but we won't really get into the British colonies until either Thursday or Friday, depending on A day or B day. So what we're going to do, I do have a PowerPoint for us. I know you guys just absolutely adore PowerPoints at this point. So I'm going to share it with you guys. And I'm going to just run through this probably pretty quickly because we need to run through it fairly quickly. Okay, so the essential question for this section is, what are the similarities and differences among the Spanish, French, Dutch, and British patterns of colonization in America? That's what we're looking for here. All right, America before the discovery of Columbus. This is what we talked about last week. So we've talked about the different Native American regions. The Northwest is up here. Here's California Intermountain. Here's the plateau and the Great Basin, the plains, Southwest, Southeast, and then the Eastern woodlands. So Native Americans ran the area until 1492. All right. So in the East, Indians like the Iroquois, the Powhatans, which if you've seen Pocahontas from the Disney movie, that's what the Powhatans are. And the Cherokee were settled into farming villages that looked similar to this. These ended up having much stronger government bodies, and they ran more like villages than some of the other areas did. This is the South, the East as well. In the Central Plains, Indians like the Sioux and the Cheyenne hunted buffalo using mass hunting techniques. We talked about them. There's the Great Plains, and they would they would scare the buffalo into running off of cliffs, and then as the stampede ran off, they'd have food. It was actually really ingenuitive. In Central America, the Aztecs formed a powerful empire and dominated surrounding Indians. We talked about the Aztecs. We talked about the Mayans and the Olmec. And then the Incans, who are going to be further south in actual South America. Here's the Aztec. This is Tenochtitlan. Here are our massive pyramids and our shrines to the gods, which we believe they got from the Mayans. All right. Here is another thing we've talked about already. So during the Renaissance, a desire for new trade routes to Asia led to an age of exploration. So the people of Europe, your England, Portugal, Spain, your German tribes are going to come up, the Dutch who are going to start taking over this area. They want to get to China. All right, so you have the Silk Road and you have these trade routes that go across Asia, but the problem with this is that you have a lot of marauders. You have a lot of bandits who live in this area who will attack people on the road. You have a lot of hostility between Europeans and areas of the Middle East because of the Crusades. And you also have, it takes a very long time to go this route. So they were hoping to find a different route to get to Asia. All right, so they started off and they would go around Africa, down and around the Cape of Good Hope, up and into India and into the Indies. Now, the problem with that is that it takes forever and 3 days. Well, Christopher Columbus said, you know what? I bet the earth is round. I know that the earth is round. So if I start in Spain and I go this way, I will eventually run into China. The problem was he didn't realize there were, these two gigantic land masses right here. So in 1492, he sailed, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And he ended up in what's today the Dominican Republic. And he called this the Indies because he thought he was over here. All right, European explorers found new trade routes, and they started forming overseas colonies. So as Christopher Columbus's discovery of America in 1492 transformed the future of American Indians and Europeans, because when he took over, when he came over here, the the Europeans started taking over the area and settling in colonies. They started colonizing the area because they realized it was rich in resources and gold and timber. There were foods that grew here that we didn't have in Europe. There were animals that were here that they didn't have there. So it's all very interesting trade, and it's going to lead to what's called the Columbian Exchange. And so the arrival of Europeans led to the introduction of new products between Indians and Europeans. All right, so things like tobacco, pumpkin, squash, turkeys, cocoa beans, which is chocolates, vanilla beans, corn, and tomatoes, and potatoes, which are going to become a huge staple. All of this is going to come from the Americas, and it's going to go into Africa, Asia, and Europe. And then from Europe, you're going to have disease like smallpox, influenza, measles, typhus, diphtheria, whooping cough, all the things that we're accustomed to now. Those are all going to come from over here and be introduced to the natives of North and South America, and it's going to absolutely devastate their populations. You're also going to have livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, all are going to be brought over for the first time and introduced. You have grains, honeybees, sugarcane. Sugarcane is going to go down to South America, and it's going to be huge. Bananas are as well. Peaches and pears, onions, olives, turnips, all of that. You are also going to have, and this is what's going to end up being called triangular trade. So if you can see here, there is a bit of a triangle. Let me see if I can. No, stop lagging. There we go. Gonna draw really, no, wait, I'm gonna draw really fast. So if you look here, from Europe to the Americas, Africa, and back up to Europe. Okay, so this is what's called triangular trade. You have goods coming from Europe, and they would travel down to Africa. They would, and this is going to be as it goes, they would trade certain things to African tribal leaders, to African governments in exchange for slaves. Those slaves would then be brought over into the Americas. Now, the thing is, most of your African slaves went to, I don't know why that's doing that. It's bothering me. Most of your African slaves went to South America or into the Caribbean, which is this area right here, because that's where sugarcane and a lot of fruits were grown. A lot came up to the Virginias and like the Virginias and Carolinas, and into Georgia as well, because that's going to be where tobacco grows the best. So, and then as that would come back, as they go into Africa, the African slaves are going to go to North America and South America, and then from the Americas are going to come products that are refined. So the product of the sugarcane, the product of tobacco, peppers, corns, tomatoes, potatoes, all of this. These goods are going to come back over here and be sold into European markets. Okay. Okay, come on now, what are you doing? Let me undo these. I hate to do that now. Here we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, guys. All right, so I'm sorry. I had to fix our thing. Okay, so introduction of European grains, horses, and cattle transformed many Indian cultures, such as what we see in the Great Plains. It makes it so much easier to hunt buffalo when you have a horse. The introduction of European diseases like smallpox and influenza killed as many as 90% of Native Americans. So we saw that with the Incan Empire and with the Aztec Empire, but it's going to take place in North America as well. Native population of central Mexico is going to rapidly decline between the 1500s and 1600s because of diseases. All right. And here's more of the triangular trade idea. So Spain sent explorers called conquistadors to the New World to find gold and to conquer lands. So they wanted gold, God, and glory. That's the three things they wanted when they came across. They came into Central and South America and up into Mexico. And that's going to be mostly Spanish and Portuguese. The Portuguese are going to hang out right down here around Brazil. And then come back, but they are going to have little small pockets around the coast of South America as well. The French came into Canada, what's today Canada mostly, and through the eastern coast. And Great Britain, of course, is going to end up down here as well. The Dutch are going to end up a little bit higher up in Canada as well. I mix these two up. This is the Dutch. The Dutch come and settle around the Hudson because that's New York and New Hampshire, and then the English are going to come in later. There we go. Cortez conquers the Aztecs. Pizarro conquers the Incas. We've already talked about those. And then gold from America increased Spain's wealth and power. And actually, this is also when we start seeing the rise of pirates. So the pirates of the Caribbean, or the Caribbean, however you want to say it. I think both ways are correct. You would have these ships, these Spanish Armada ships, that would sail out of the Gulf of Mexico. And there is this tailwind and current right in between like Cuba and Florida. And they would have to wait for the current and the wind to pick back up to get them on the right course to get to Spain instead of getting to Africa. So they would have these huge weighted down gold ships hanging out, waiting for the right currents and close to the forts that they had built in Florida. And the pirates would come and raid the ships there. So that's why they were so prominent in the Caribbean. And it's also like Pirates of the Caribbean with like Jack Sparrow and all. That's Aztec gold. That's where that concept comes from. Success of Spanish colonies encouraged other European powers to form permanent colonies in North America. So Spanish colonies are mainly going to be in what's today Mexico, California, and Texas, and then Central America and a little portion of South America. The French are going to come in through Canada and come down the river systems, and they're going to settle the Ohio River Valley. We'll talk about that later on. The English are going to hit up the colonies. The Dutch are going to be part of this too. The Swedish technically are part of the Dutch in this particular time frame, or we're going to count them as part of the Dutch. We're not going to worry about this part. We are going to talk about the class system. So if you were Spanish and you were the top percentage, you came from Spain in these colonies, you lived at the top. You were the richest. You were in charge of the government. You were in charge of these large plantations that they had. You were the tippy top. Creoles and mestizos, which are natives and the children of natives and Spanish individuals. So individuals who were mixed and had Spanish blood within them. Those people were the next tiers. Indians were the biggest population, they were the biggest population, and they were the kind of lower tier. And then you had African slaves, which made up a very small portion of the population at first, at least. They had a large amount of African slaves that came over later on. But they were at the very bottom of the pyramid. 1600s and the 1700s, Spain dominated the Central and South America regions and the Southeast and Southwest regions of North America. So they dominated South America, they dominate Central America, and then they are going to take over Florida and basically what's part of the plains these days. The French are really going to settle in Louisiana territory as well as the Ohio River Basin. And the British don't really get started until far later. Spanish conquistadors searched for gold and silver. They searched for gold and silver everywhere. They were successful in some areas of Spain, in some areas of California. I think a few areas in South Carolina and Georgia as well, but they didn't have as much luck as they did in the areas of Mexico and Central America. Spain converted Indians to Catholicism and created missions in America. A lot of their forts are also old missions. King of Spain, who sent viceroys to strictly govern the colonies, and the colonists could not vote and they had to view freedom. So this is a viceroy. This is one of the Spaniards who would come over and be in charge. The economy of the Spanish colonies was based on mining of gold and silver. Here's the Spanish gold. Spanish Main would be this area right here because it was the main area that the Spanish were in. They also controlled this area. There's also a nice little Leviathan right there. Haciendas are plantations. They used I can never remember how you say that. And in Camine, I'm not gonna pretend like I know. It's a system of Indian workers to farm cash crops like sugar. So they did have native workers, but the problem was that the native workers knew the area far better than they did. So the natives would hang around until they realized they weren't getting a fair share, and then they could escape into the backwoods and get away. So the natives didn't really work very well for them, so they had to rely on African slaves as time went on. We've already talked about that. Viceroys are the royal governors. White Spanish colonists are Creoles. Colonial women led to intermarriages between white colonists and Indians, so those are mestizos. And then Native Indians and African slaves made up the bottom. Use these documents to guess what the French colonies in North America were like. We're not going to do that. But you can kind of tell, very religious. They converted natives to Catholicism as well. The French got along well with the natives. There were wars. They took over land, but they got on pretty well with them. In the 1600s, French explorer Samuel de Champlain failed to find a northwest passage, so they were looking for a passage that would take them over the top of North America, as opposed to going all the way down around the South America to get to China, which is still where they're trying to get. They're still trying to get to the East Indies. So he failed to find his Northwest Passage through Canada, but he created the French colony of Quebec. So instead of finding Northwest Passage, they just started taking over this territory. France claimed land from Canada to New Orleans and controlled territory along the Mississippi River. Why did the French colonize in America? I'm glad you asked. Like Spain, they focused on wealth and converting Indians to Catholicism. So they saw it as more of a land grab and more of there's trade here. So most French colonists profited from the fur trade, small scale farming, or lumbering. Because the French needed furs, they were most friendly with the local Indians, and the colonists had to be Catholic, and few people immigrated to America. Like the Spanish colonies, the French colonies' governments were strictly controlled by France, who ruled via royal governors. So you have a king, a viceroy, a master of the navy. You've got governors and attendants, local governors, superior councils, and then the settlers are at the very bottom. Okay, so use these to see what the Dutch in the colonies in North America were like. There's a picture of the Dutch. They had really nice little settlements as well. They were friendly-ish with the Native Americans, but they weren't. The French had the kind of the corner of that. So the Dutch created a colony in present-day New York City called New Amsterdam that became New Netherland. Why did they colonize this area? To attract settlers, they allowed it was created by private investors of a joint stock company who hoped to profit from trade in America. So what a joint stock company would be is you take you as a investor would send someone over to the colonies, and you would give them basically a portion of the company, and they would run it in the colonies for you and send the money back to you, but they would also get a cut of what they were making. So to attract settlers, the Dutch government allowed anyone, and they allowed absolutely anyone, regardless of religion, nation. Um, even they even allowed that. So, okay, so the Dutch. This is getting ahead, but we'll go ahead and get ahead for just a second. The Dutch were much more resistant to slavery than other areas were. So they gave political freedom to their colonists. They said, go to the colonies, prosper. If you want to go, you can go. They were fairly friendly with the natives, but they didn't do as much trade with them. And the African slaves who ended up in the Dutch colonies were often treated far better, often, not always, were often treated far better and were freed more often as well. As a result, New Netherland was one of the most free and diverse colonies in America. So, what are the British colonies in North America like? This one we should know. So, like the Dutch, the British settled in America through joint stock companies of private investors. British colonists came to America for a wide variety of reasons. Some came to escape poverty, some came to gain wealth and land. There is, you may be one of the poorest of the poor living back in England, and you have, maybe a small spot out on the street crowded with other people. And then it comes up, hey, there's this, there's land, or an untold amount of land. We don't really know how much is out there, and it's there for the taking. So a lot of people came over here to have land, to start over, to have a livelihood. Most of the people who came for land or wealth came to the southern colonies, so like the Carolinas, Georgia, Maryland, and Virginia. Some came for religious freedom and to flee for religious persecution. Those are going to be like the Quakers, some Protestants, a few Catholics, and they're going to settle in the northern colonies such as Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And some came to escape the violence during the English Civil War. So, like we had a civil war, England had a civil war as well, which you should have talked about in 8th or 9th grade history. So as a result, the British colonies are going to be different from each other, and they were never very unified. So here are your 13 original colonies. It makes me the 50 Nifty song, 13 original colonies. Anyway, so you have northern colonies, middle colonies, and southern colonies. So as a result, they're very, very, very different. So you've got 3 sections, and those 3 sections tend to have more to do with each other than anything else. So they also developed a colonial government. They have the British Crown, the royal governor, and then you have a council and colonial assembly. And they developed a policy which is going to be called salutary neglect. And they're going to allow the colonists to start creating local laws and creating taxes and creating colonial assemblies. The colonial assemblies were elected by colonists. They made the laws, they did the taxes, and they got paid a governor's salary, or they paid the governor's salary. The council got appointed by this governor, the advisory board to the governor, and they acted as the highest court in each colony. And this tended to be a bit more under royal control, but the colonial assemblies are going to be huge because they are going to start gaining power. And the salutary neglect is it's neglect by allowing these to grow into something that is their own. The royal governors were sent by the king, but they had little power, but they could dismiss the colonial assembly, but the colonial assembly could then turn around and overpower the royal governor. The societies and economies of British colonies were dependent upon the reasons people settled. So here we have southern colonies. Southern colonies like Virginia had cash crop economies and had large gaps between the very rich and the very poor. And you had very, very, very rich farmers who, when you think about like Gone with the Wind and big plantations and all of that, that is your rich farmers. Those are your huge plantation owners. And then you have very poor farmers who really just do a little bit of subsidy farming for themselves and make money off of cash crops, who might have had, 2 or 3 slaves that worked alongside the farmers. And you did have slave labor. Most slaves for the Americas came to the southern colonies. All right. New England colonies like Massachusetts are going to be closely connected by religion and families with an economy based largely on subsistence farming. So these are families. These are people coming for religious freedom, and these are going to be the more peaceful, I guess, societies. Most people who came to the southern colonies were young men who didn't have families, who were looking to make some money. Most people who came up here were religious families. And then the middle colonies, which are going to be unlike the Spanish and the French. The British didn't try very hard to convert, marry, or trade with the local Indians, and therefore they had a lot of conflict over the land. And that's going to happen specifically in your southern colonies and your northern colonies. There's going to be a little bit in your New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey areas, but not quite as much. All right, no, we're not going to do that. I think that's it. All right, that is everything. So those are your three colonial, or those are your big colonial powers. Either Thursday or Friday, depending upon which A day or B day. We're going to be talking about the 13 colonies specific to the UK, specifically to England, because these are the ones that are going to eventually form the United States. All right, so let me stop my share. Okay, all right, so that's everything. You guys will have an assignment for this. I will post it below, and I'll make sure that the assignment due dates are actually there, but it'll be due on Monday. So you guys have a great day, afternoon, evening, whatever it is for you.